How can we verify our private VLAN configurations? There's two different ways. First way is to verify the mappings, the associations, and the ports using the show VLAN private VLAN command. If we go out to DSW2, let's type in that show VLAN private VLAN. We'll see here that we have our primary VLAN, which is VLAN 200. We have our secondary VLAN, which is VLAN 401 and 402. 401 is a community VLAN, 402 is an isolated VLAN. And the ports that have been mapped to the community VLAN are 1/0/21 and 1/0/22, which are connected up to DNS1 and DNS2. And we have gigabit 1/0/23 and 24, part of the isolated VLAN. So file server 1 and file server 2 are in the isolated VLANs. In this case, though, it is our SVI that is the promiscuous port. So therefore, the SVI does not show up here as being the promiscuous port for the primary VLAN. However, if you're not using an SVI as the promiscuous port, you will see in the output the promiscuous port. So in this example here, gigabit 0/1 has been configured as the promiscuous port. So if we examine the topology that goes along with this configuration example, there's gigabit 0/1, the promiscuous port, pointing up to the default gateway. And gig 02 and 03 are in the isolated VLAN 101, and gig 04 and 5 are in the community VLAN of 102. So that's what we see in this output here. Now we can also use the show interfaces, then specify the interface type and port number, switch port command. Typically, we utilize that to verify VLAN information and trunking information, but it also has output at the bottom related to private VLANs. So we can verify the private VLAN information in the output. We can see if it's the promiscuous port or a host port, what the mappings are. Let's take a look at that on DSW2. So on DSW2, we'll type in show interfaces. We'll look at gigabit Ethernet 1/0/21. We'll type in the switch port keyword. And if we go way down to the bottom right here, we can see that the administrative private VLAN host association is the primary VLAN is 200 and the secondary VLAN is 401. So we can see that mapping that we have between the primary and secondary in this particular case. We can also see up at the top that the administrative mode is private VLAN host because we configured that, but the operational mode is also private VLAN host because we are operating as a private VLAN host for this particular port. You scroll down a little more to the bottom, it even says operational private VLAN, primary is 200, secondary is 401. But it doesn't tell you that 401 is a community VLAN. So you will have to use the show VLAN private VLAN command to see that 401 is a community VLAN, and you can see all the ports that are associated with it. Let's look at the output of the isolated port, though, of /24, and we'll see if we see anything different. In the output, we'll see that the administrative mode is private VLAN host. We're operating as a private VLAN host. But let's scroll down here. Administrative private VLAN host association, 200 is the primary, and 402 is the secondary VLAN. But again, I don't see any indication that this is an isolated VLAN. So we'll have to look at the output of show VLAN private VLAN and see that 402 is an isolated VLAN. And lastly, if your promiscuous port is not an SVI, like in our configuration, you can verify if that particular port is a promiscuous port. So in this example, gig 01 is the promiscuous port. So we can see from the output that the private VLAN administrative mode is promiscuous. And here is the mappings that we have. We have 100, which is the primary VLAN in this example, and then 101 is a secondary VLAN, and 102 is a secondary VLAN. But again, it doesn't tell you the type of secondary VLAN. So you have to go back to show VLAN private VLAN and verify what type of VLANs they are. This one's isolated, so 101's isolated, 102 is community.